Alright. So today we're going to wrap up essentially the last bit of kind of putting all the pieces together, putting exercise, nutrition, lifestyle habits, all of those things that we've talked about up till now, putting it together. And the way I've gone about it is used some client examples, people who are unnamed, to walk through, really the basics of, all right, how do we apply this to varying stages of, life, varying stages of athleticism, pain, surgeries, that sort of thing, because that's what I want you guys to get out of it is not necessarily how does the perfect ideal scenario work out, but how do we apply this, in reality for the average person. So I think everybody here knows me, but for those watching the recording, my name's Jackson Moore, personal trainer, and I help mostly those who are retired get stronger and live out their retirement on their own terms. So let's dive in. Just get a quick review of like the basics, the fundamentals, the things that we want to strive for. These are what we'll call our ideal scenarios, right? So we've talked about these different things. So cardiovascular training is kind of the minimum of 90 minutes per week. That's what we want to strive for. Strength training, 90 minutes per week, same ideal. High protein intake from a nutrition standpoint. We can also say high fiber intake, that 25 to 35 grams daily fiber protein intake, half a gram to a gram per pound of body weight daily. 7 to 9 hours of sleep daily. Reinforce that with a WIC routine. Again, these are ideals, things to strive for. I know that's not the reality for everybody. It's not possible for everybody. And a lifestyle that maximizes our community and minimizes our stress, and then some positive stress management techniques. And I would also say, that a piece of that, we want to pursue things that bring us joy, right? As well, not just minimizing stress. So, yeah, those are the fundamentals. We've kind of talked about how do we, what are some strategies to get to that point in different ways. We're going to use some specific examples to talk through, all right, in certain scenarios, what does that look like? Where do we start? What steps do we take? And how do we apply it? So client A, this is a longer term client of several years, history of numerous surgeries, pain, poor mobility, falls, and the falls was something that was particularly concerning. So with this, whenever I have somebody who comes to me that there's either poor mobility or a lot of pain or a lot of limited movement, the first thing we really want to focus on is restoring that movement. Because you can't really build strength on, a lack of mobility. Otherwise, you're going to increase that stiffness and really cause problems with the inability to move. So the first phase, which is really, I have these outlined in phases for how we did this. I'll walk through actually a couple of different exercises that we used to do this. First phase was mobility and pain management. Can we get to a place where pain is manageable, pain is reduced? Can we get to a place where we can move through larger ranges of motion at pretty much all joints, all the major ones anyways. And then from there, once we do that, then we can move on to sort of that strengthening phase. Improving, our muscle control, improving our muscle size, muscle strength, and then with that, we're also focusing on, using that time to focus on protein intake, because those are going to support each other, and those are going to help do sort of the same thing. Once, for this particular client, cardiovascular training, because of the mobility compromise and the fall risk, that wasn't a big, there wasn't a whole lot of available methods to improve cardiovascular endurance. So we had to go through multiple years of phases to get to the point where it was something we could really focus on. Now, in that phase, currently this is where we're at, is focusing on that stage of things and really trying to push, that up strategically, slowly, and use that principle of progressive overload, applying it to cardiovascular training, and really, taking it one step at a time, where we started with, a smaller time frame, I think something along the lines of 10 minutes, and then slowly gotten a little bit longer time frames, but also gotten faster at doing the same, the same time frame, but doing more in the same amount of time, like we talked about, with the movement module. So, I'm going to backtrack a little bit to the mobility piece, and just showing you like how, a couple of different exercises that are pretty simple, pretty easy to do. Most people can do them, but depending on where you're at, it might be a challenge to start, right? So for people with fall risk, a lot of times, people at higher fall risk, a lot of times what I see is a compromised hip mobility, particularly the ability to lift, the one leg off the ground high enough. So you'll see where this might, they might struggle to get beyond, a few, what we'll call that 30, 45 degrees of motion at the hip. There's not a whole lot of strength there in the hip flexor. So one of the things I'll have them do, and I've got a nice step here, holding on to something in front of you or to the side of you for support, you can hold on with one hand, take the other hand, lift yourself up into this position, and then all the exercise is can I get from here a little bit up, and just practice pulling that hip up and down, 5 reps, 10 reps at a time. Over time, you're able to get that further. And even for people who have some neurological conditions, just the act of practicing getting into that position, or even using, a hand to assist getting into that position, teaches the brain that this is not a position that's going to harm me, right? So you're kind of hijacking the neurology a little bit to teach the brain, all right, this is a safe position. I'm going to move through it a couple different times. Over time, usually around the 8 to 12 week range, that's when we see those changes take place. And you can see, especially mobility, those things will take place usually around 2 months, 2-3 months. Depends on the severity of how long that person's not been able to do that particular movement, right? In this example, it was a lot longer of a, more of a lifetime disability. That was something that we had to work through. So it took a little longer timeline for the phases, lots of overlap. I'll give you another example. This is one, even just something like a calf raise done with long period of time. So calf raise being here, just up on your toes. Something like that where, elevating the heel so it can go down and up. Having something like that where it's kind of simple, but it's where I can take my hands and hold on to something in front of myself and take a lot of the pressure off of my legs below. Something like that is very adaptable. It allows me to move through a larger range of motion with assistance without putting as much on. So, talking about, so this is a client I know I'll have for quite some time. A phase 4 is, what a phase 4 would look like for this person is now can we improve to the point of, really developing some athleticism. So, and this is where we kind of started to dip our toe a little bit with things like med ball slams, with things like squats at a little faster speed, where that person's holding on to something, going down, and then quickly kind of using their arms and the assistance to pull themselves up, getting the body used to moving quickly. One, it's going to help fall prevention, because when you're in a position where you're slipping or you're about to fall, you need to move fast in order to prevent it or reduce the injury that could happen with fall. 2, it's going to allow you to stay youthful and move better overall if we can move faster, right? We think of athletes, these are the people who can move quickly. A lot of people just lose that because they don't train like that. So if we can train with some speed, slowly build up, it's one of the things that allows us to continue to be able to move like that and not hurt ourselves in the process. Right. So that's what, you know, an approach here, a good example here is if there's no way we could have started with cardiovascular training with this, you know, intentional cardiovascular training and plyometrics power with this client, it wouldn't have worked. It probably would have caused injury rather than, you know, been preventative. So we do have to take steps, and this is just a good example of start where you're at. Don't feel like you have to do everything all at once. Let's focus on one, maybe two things, two components first, and build our way up. It's a great example of patience pays off too, in the long run. Any questions about this particular situation? Sorry. So, in general, yeah, there we go. So in general, I kind of have these here. So what we started with was the draft, kind of the reduction in pain. That was the initial thing. Reduce fall risk, fall frequency and risk. So now we have sometimes where there's a slip, there might even be a full fall, but injuries that would have happened and had happened in the past aren't happening with falls anymore. Walking in the garden, hiking, and then more recently, lifting over 115 pounds without pain. So that was tremendous. And this is kind of how. So I might be off on the minutes here for this person, but five workouts a week consistently. Communication about concerns, weaknesses, so that I'm always understanding like, hey, what are the things that we need to shore up? As certain things are getting much stronger, we need to make sure we don't have any glaring, weaknesses that we're falling behind and getting too far ahead of ourselves. 4,000 steps per day, probably closer to 5 or 6 now, if I had to guess, maybe more. And really, 3 full years of consistent, not missing a workout more than once a week on a bad week, and then illness causing a handful of misses, but probably the most consistent client I've ever had. This one also a good note here. This person, because of especially prior surgeries, prior history, utilized a very good chiropractor who unfortunately is not local. And a massage therapist to work through, kind of as an adjunct, and had done that prior to working with me. And that certainly was a tremendous help throughout this process of managing some of the additional stress that can come with, physical stress that can come with training hard and working hard. So.
I have a question.
Yes.
Why would a goal be to lift 115 pounds?
So for the purpose of general muscle building, so this is, we want to reach the point where we're lifting as much as we possibly can without adding to our injury risk, because it's going to improve our muscle strength, it's going to improve our bone density, it's going to improve our resilience to pain. It's kind of counterintuitive when it comes to the pain thing, but when you accommodate your body to heavier lifting, you do actually increase your pain tolerance because you're regularly exposing yourself to some discomfort. For me, another thing that I like with this particular, I do this mostly with women, is if we can find one lift that is very low risk, and usually for me it's a trap bar deadlift. If I can find a lift that's very low risk for this person, I can increase their confidence quite a bit, just physical confidence in themselves and in their body's abilities for somebody who's been disabled, had a disability for a long time, if we can change the way they view their body as from maybe not capable to tremendously capable, that can do a lot of positive things for just their personal outlook on what they're capable of.
So how does one decide what should be the maximum amount of weight you should be able to reach so that you build towards that?
That is a great question. In terms of what's the ultimate ceiling, there's no way I can tell any one person what that is for themselves. I think for somebody like this, without a large background, not a whole lot of years of lifting prior to this, it's something that you have to develop over time and really comes with years of experience lifting that kind of weight. For example, I've been lifting for close to 10 years. I'm younger, so I anticipate I'll still be able to increase my maxes for probably the next 10, 15 years. But because at that point I'll have 25 years of lifting experience, I don't anticipate being able to increase my ceiling that much beyond that. Does that make sense? Whereas somebody who's new to really pushing themselves in heavier lifts can probably, regardless of age, can probably continue to push that up quite a bit because their body's not had the years to develop, the skill of weightlifting, because there is skill involved, two, the neuromuscular connections that are required, and then three, just the general strength and muscle. So it's hard to tell. You can't really say there's a number. It kind of depends on weight too, body weight, because a smaller person's probably not going to lift. I think a smaller woman in her 70s probably not going to lift 300 plus pounds, with a short time frame, right? Probably not healthy at that point. But you can slowly, progressively, safely take it up, 5, 10 pounds at a time. So that's the way I like to approach it. Is just don't shoot for the moon right out of the gate, but just add a few at a time. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay, cool.
So would it be like 150 pounds?
Not a dumbbell. No. I'll show you. So have you seen the barbells that are like a single bar? It's like this particular lift is a bar that has like a hex you can step into. So it has the bar on the sides, but it has a little open space in the middle. You step into it, and it's got two handles, and then you essentially do that motion. So it's kind of a halfway. The reason I like that lift in particular for most people, it's halfway between a deadlift and a squat, but it's a little safer than both because it doesn't put the same sort of stress on your back that a deadlift can, but it also changes the squat because you're not putting anything on your shoulders, where you don't have that kind of risk. Where with the trap bar deadlift, if I'm in the middle of the repetition and I feel unsafe, I can just drop the bar and step away from it. So it's a very safe lift, if that makes sense. So, yeah. Any other questions on this scenario? All right, so client B. So this is a client I've had for just under a year, still with me. He was 60 years old when we started. History of knee surgery, had just finished up some physical therapy for shoulder and low back pain. Doesn't have an ACL in one of his knees, but likes to golf. He has a desk job, so he's very sedentary during the day. But then part of his job, as in finding clients, is he finds himself on the golf course often for the nature of his work. So he wants to enjoys the game of golf, wants to continue to be able to play, but what he came to me with is, hey, we have a scenario where I'm in a lot of pain, I keep hurting myself, but I kind of need to continue to do this because this is the clientele I need to pursue. So that's the scenario. So phase one for him, and we'll say this was like first 4 to 6 months or so. Phase one for him was, we need to lose some weight because he had 30 or 40 pounds that could have been lost just to help reduce general pain, general inflammation, reduce the load on his knees and his back. Improve his mobility because he was stiff as a board, and work on just general warm-ups. So one of the things that I think is neglected often when it comes to even just something like golfing is if you're gonna hit a ball hit with power and then you're gonna walk all day long potentially carrying things, some people are gonna carry their bags for the whole round. You're gonna be if you're not in putting importance on a good warm-up and a good cool down, you're gonna be pretty stiff. So that was one of the things that we tackled with him. And then phase two was strength, power, cardio. Like he was already doing things that were athletic. So we had to kind of build on the back end, like, hey, you're hurting yourself because you're trying to do things that are athletic and you don't have a good solid base to do that. So we did, worked again. You notice mobility comes first. Then we put the athleticism focus in, worked on strength, power, cardio, and now he's in a place where I think it's been, last time he had any sort of nagging issue was January. So we're in pretty good shape. 8 months without an issue for him is pretty good. And he's driving the ball about 40 yards further, which is a pretty substantial increase at 60. So yeah, drastic reduction in pain. He's driving an extra 20 to 40 yards each hit. Stronger, more mobile than ever. He's mentioned, more mobile than he was in high school because that's when his knee issues started in high school. And he's lost about 35 pounds total over the course of. He had started some of that weight loss prior to working with me. So over the course of about a year and a half, he's lost that. And I think that's also a good place to note, like 35 pounds in a year and a half, it's like 2 pounds per month over that time frame. Half pound per week or slightly less than that. So it's good to note that it's very, it's a slow approach to it, but it is sustainable for him. I prefer when we look at weight loss, if we can zoom out a little bit and say, I'm going to go for this over a year-long process or a 9-month process. It tends to work out better. It tends to be more sustainable because you're not trying to lose 10, 15 pounds in a month. You're trying to do it over a longer period of time. You're able to make smaller changes and still have the same effect. Yeah, a little shorter workouts here, not as frequent, 3 times per week, and even then, I think adherence to that was probably about 70%. So if I went back and tracked, it's somewhere in the realm of like 60 to 70%. Changing. A big thing that we talked about often was, can we change the perception of self? And it gets to your question from earlier, perception of self from fragile, somebody who's hurt every 3 to 4 months, and is wondering, is this ever going to be different? To resilient, somebody who can, tolerate a tweak every now and then without it really interrupting his schedule, can really do a lot, I used the example with him recently of, hey, he had a week where he went and golfed 5 times in a week for the first time a couple weeks back. No issues, So for us, it was, all right, we went from twice in a week would hurt you. Now you can do 5 without really feeling the effects. You know, his elbow was a little cranky after that, but you play that much golf, you know, something like, yeah, I don't know, it's close to 100 holes of golf. You play that much golf in a week, your elbow's going to be a little cranky if you're not used to it. So, periodic calorie deficit. So he would come in and out of that weight loss, where it was, hey, we're going to maintain for a little bit, you know, 3 or 4 weeks at a time. Then we're going to lose, you know, have a period where we're losing, just to kind of let the body adjust to the new weight as he was going. And then really focused on sleep habits and managing work stress. So, you know, we've talked about stress management. This is somebody who's kind of working overtime to provide for his family, and in a really odd schedule scenario. So there are periods of his work where it's, you know, kind of go for a season, and then we pull away. So for him, we focus on consistent sleep routine, being, you know, honoring that to the point where it was a non-negotiable, had to be in bed by a certain time, and had to follow, you know, a handful of steps, and it seemed to work out really well for him. So, any questions about this scenario? Kind of why, you know, we chose to approach that way. All right, move on then. Yeah, so this is one. Throughout this process, you know, he had a number of injuries along the way that we, you know, talked about, and really took that mindset of, hey, you can, you know, your body can be resilient to these injuries. Let's find ways to keep moving forward, and just kind of adjusting. You know, but we don't have to do the same routine. We don't have to stop just because you're hurt. Let's just change it. Let's find what you can do. And so progress can coexist with injury. That's something that, you know, the more people that can adopt that mentality, the more people I think will find themselves with, you know, a really resilient self-image, and a resilient body as a result. Another client, this was a shorter term client, but someone that I worked with. She was in her 60s. She had spinal fusions about 3 years prior. You know, had been in pain for 5+ years, hadn't really found an issue even with the surgery. So surgery didn't really help, difficulty sleeping. For her, it was a single phased approach, as we needed to reduce a little bit of body fat percentage, not much, but a little bit. And then increase daily movement in all planes. And I'm gonna pause there for a moment. This is where I think a lot of, especially back pain, people with consistent back pain are not served as well as I think they could be, because planes of motion are often not addressed as much as they could be. And so what I mean by that is, like, if you know, were to put me on a piece of paper, you know, this would be movement in the frontal plane. And so, you know, frontal plane movement of the spine is that it can, you know, move side to side like this. A lot of that is often ignored, or not worked through in my experience. So, you know, we exposed her to movement in the frontal plane. You know, if you cut me down the middle this way, and you're seeing me from the side, you know, we exposed her to movement in the sagittal plane, where your spine bends and extends. And then if you were to put a little pin down, you know, put me on a little axis right here, movement in where I'm rotating, right? And your spine does all those movements. So for her, it was, let's slowly expose, you know, you to these movements so that your spine actually, we're reducing, you know, your stiffness and kind of maybe breaking through some scar tissue in, you know, that had formed from surgery and from years of pain in all of those different planes. So pretty simple approach, but had, you know, some really good results. You know, it took 8 weeks for her to be pain-free. She lost 5 pounds. Like I said, it wasn't much, but it helped. And, you know, she's walking regularly. That was one thing. Wanted to be able to walk with her friends. Had 6 grandkids, 7 now. Wanted to be able to play with her grandkids without issue. And that was even nice, and then undisturbed sleep for the first time in decades was a tremendous improvement. So for her, even shorter, 25 minute, as short as 25 minutes a day, 3 times a week. Really paid attention to, where do we want to be in 3 months? She had a shorter time frame. To where do we want to be in 3 months? Let's kind of reverse engineer it to what we're doing now from an activity standpoint, and say, all right, what gradual increase gets us from here to there? 4,000 steps per day. And then for her, just as an aside, from a nutrition standpoint, I don't prescribe to any particular one way of doing things when it comes to like weight loss, for example. I don't think there's a diet that works for everyone. It's dependent on what you can adhere to and what works best for you. Everybody's got different hunger signaling, everybody's got different routines. Even culturally, what you grew up with changes how you can eat. For her, intermittent fasting worked well. Just reducing the amount of time in the day that she was eating. Nothing super fancy about that, but it worked, right? And then, really focusing on, like I said, taking that progress of where do we want her to be from a movement standpoint, and reverse engineering it from that point, saying, all right, here's our exact progressions that we want to be at, and really just trying to educate about pain so that we can move forward without fear of a little bit of pain during training. So that was how we approached that one. With this one, you don't have to accept pain as normal. For her, this was somebody who pain was normal. Pain was present for her in every night for years, and so she told me on our first evaluation, hey, this is probably something I'm just going to have to live with. And I kind of pushed back on that and said, maybe it's not. Let's see. Let's see if we can't change that. And then past surgeries don't automatically come with limits. This is one thing that I will ruffle some feathers on when I'm talking to physicians is people who say that there's lifelong contraindications. That does change depending on the person for their surgeries. Like if you are in a completely different spot from a mobility standpoint, from an athleticism, from a muscle standpoint, even from a body fat percentage standpoint, from a cardiovascular standpoint, all those factors change what you're able to do. And so for her, she had kind of been told, hey, these are the limits, and we tested them a little bit safely, carefully, and found that if we pushed them just a little bit, we could get a lot of good results for her. So, and again, I say this as somebody who's worked in, got his start working with people rehabbing from surgery. That was where I started. So it's not just from a personal trainer saying that, somebody who has a lot of experience with intense rehab. So. Last one, and then I'll open it up to you guys. How am I doing on time?
It is 11:06.
Perfect. I'll open it up to you guys to ask more specific questions as you want. Before I do that, anybody have questions about this client? I don't think I asked about that. And again, I'm trying to give you guys different scenarios that are changes how we approach based on the what it's looking like, and really giving you this last one, not somebody who started out in that much pain. So client D worked with me for 4 or 5 months or so. We kind of tapered off how intense we were working together. Where it started, we were having calls regularly and meeting together regularly, and then she became very independent very quickly. So it's always nice when that happens, and you can see somebody really take it and own it. She was 70 years old when we started, avid pickleball player, and for her it was nothing major, but wanted to lose a little bit of weight, wanted to get stronger, wanted to be able to enjoy pickleball for a lot longer, has a couple grandkids, wanted to obviously be present for them, And then she had some frequent mild knee pain and low back pain. So really, nagging stuff, but not anything that you would go see your doctor or physician about. So for her, it was a single phase plan. She was already training cardiovascularly. She was already, doing athletic things, playing pickleball. She was already strength training. It was, let's introduce a slightly different approach, and then let's make sure that the intensity of the strength training is high enough. Because for her, it was, maybe this resonates with people. You find a routine and then you kind of stick with it. For a lot of people that I work with, the principle of progressive overload that we've talked about, where you slowly build up, like we just talked about earlier today, that wasn't present in her workout. So we needed to introduce that to allow her to make the progress that she needed, rather than really just being at maintenance for a long time. And then I had one single rehab exercise for the knee. I'm very much, when it comes to rehab and like pain, I try to be a person who's a minimal, kind of minimum effective dose, because a lot of times, you'll go to physical therapy or somewhere else, you'll get, 24 exercises for one very small part, small body part, and it's not wrong, but sometimes it just overwhelms the body, overwhelms the system. And so it's not, it might be too much for something that's already hurting in terms of too much too soon. And so that's kind of my approach is, can we throw one or two things at it and see how it adapts and manage, the volume of training and volume of load that area is tolerating to allow you to progress and reduce pain. And really to allow you to heal, So she is, what she's accomplished, she's rapidly approaching her first pull-up. Not quite there yet, but getting there. No knee, no low back pain. She told me, this was when we were working together about a year ago. She was getting to skip with her granddaughter without pain, which is pretty cool, because that's something she would have been afraid to do prior. And she's now lifting over 130 pounds for reps, so not just once, but over and over and over again. And this is somebody who prior to this had not really lifted over 50 pounds. So for her, introducing, and this is the same lift, it's that trap bar deadlift I was talking about. I like it, I use it a lot, it's pretty popular. It's very helpful for minimizing injury, maximizing results. That's why I like it. For her, it was really, I'm looking down all these things, very similar approach. I actually had to pull her back from what she wanted to do. She wanted to train 7 days a week. I said, let's do 5. Because as someone with a little bit of history of pain and knowing, like, not only is she training, but then she's going and playing pickleball on top of that, and then maybe she's, gardening, and then maybe she's, going out and playing with her grandkids, So it's like, all right, let's manage that volume a little bit and reduce it and not go so hard. And that seemed to help, slowly increasing load over time. And then really, not fearing the heavier weights for her was a big deal. Can we create a mindset that, like, all right, you're strong, like you're 70, you're playing pickleball every day, you're picking up your grandkids who are 30, 40 pounds, you're strong. Let's lean into that and do it carefully, do it with intention and strategy behind it, but let's kind of reduce our fear of those heavier weights so that we can get the results that they're going to yield. For her, a smaller person, I kept having this conversation with her about, can we change the mindset about weight loss? Because I think you've already lost enough weight and now we want to focus on maintaining muscle, building muscle. Sometimes that's a harder conversation, sometimes it's easier. But, so for her, it was let's really focus on the bone density aspect of building strength there. So and then focusing on protein intake to support that, right? Support the bone density, support muscle building. Lesson for her, you can get strong at 70. This was her, she's stronger at 70, she's 71 or 72 now. She's stronger now than she was when she was in her 30s. So for somebody like that, and this is where I go back to the comment about your experience in training in a certain way. Like that really is a bigger indicator of what your ceiling is than your just age. So that's hopefully encouraging for folks. That you can push beyond what you limit yourself to. Any questions on this particular client, this example, or what we may have done in particular? Okay.
Just a random question about progressive overload and like when you get to the point of maybe needing to level up, I guess.
Yeah.
So say you're doing 20 pounds and that's too light for you now. You've got good reps in that.
Yeah.
But then you move up to 25, which for dumbbells is the next one, and you probably need to be at like 22.
Yeah.
Because the 25s you just
Right.
can't get there. So do you go back to 20s and try to get your reps up? Do you do a mix and you try and maybe get 2 reps of 25 and then do the rest of your reps in 20s?
Yeah.
Or like how do you get to that
Yeah.
next level when you can't quite get there?
You hit it on the head. What I would do in that scenario is you find, so at the lower weights like that, like the higher you go in weight, the less those increments are percentage increases,
Yeah.
right? So if
Yeah.
going from a 5 to a 10 pound weight is 100% increase, usually that's what's available at the gyms, right? Or to purchase at home. It's like you have 100% increase from going from 5 to 10. 20 to 25, again, it's a very similar scenario, it's 25% increase. It's a pretty big jump to go up by 5 pounds. In that scenario, yes, reps are gonna be your friend there. What I like to do is I kind of focus on strength reps first. So for example, when I first introduce, the next weight, I might just do, anywhere from like 2 to 5 reps at that next weight, depending on what it is. I'll then build that up to, 10, 12, maybe even 15. In some cases, you can go as far as 20. An argument can be made for more, but it's probably, at that point, you probably just want to go up in weight. But yeah, so then you get up to that point, you feel like you're ready for the next one, go to the next one. And drop the reps at that point. So for example, I go up to 15 reps at 20 pounds. If I can do 15 reps at 20 pounds, I can definitely do 3 to 5 reps
Okay.
at
But that's not
20
gonna I guess in some ways it feels like you're losing your progress then because you went from 20 reps to now you're like, wow, I can barely do this up 3 times.
It's a different approach.
Okay.
Because at that number of reps, each individual rep, I'm more focusing on muscular endurance at that point. A little bit of raw strength, but for the lower reps, anything 5 and below, really what I'm focusing on is do I actually have the strength to move this weight?
Yeah.
That's at that lower rep range. That's what you're training. That's what you're focusing on. If you can do 15 reps at 20 pounds, you can do 5. You can almost certainly do 5 at 25. And there's you can look at like 1 rep max calculators online. And it'll show you all right, if I know I can do a 1 rep here, or if I know I can do 20 reps here, how many, what is my predicted, repetitions that I can do at a higher rate.
Okay.
That can be helpful. I've used those before just to check and kind of double check myself. And I found them to be surprisingly accurate, even for higher numbers. So I tested my 1 rep max of the trap bar deadlift based on a 20 rep that I had done the week prior. And those are pretty far apart in terms of what they were focusing on, and it was spot on. Like the calculator.net calculator was spot on.
Gotcha.
So simple tool, free tool. and it's been surprisingly accurate in my experience. So, yeah, that was a great question.
You were saying they're losing weight, but they're adding muscle mass.
Yeah.
So how do you know you're losing weight?
So for this person, like the couple of people who were losing weight, so this person didn't really lose weight. She wanted to, but convinced her not to. A couple of others did. Obviously, the one lost like 35 plus
Yeah,
pounds.
that's a pain size. So
Yeah.
it's obvious.
Yeah. So you notice that really you can notice muscle tone, right? So if if I have a lot more body fat on me, but I'm the same weight, I'm going to look a little looser. I'm not going to look as muscular. So you can see a little bit by the look. Another is really just you can do a body density scan. We didn't with these. We just kind of knew based on the results that we were getting, like clearly muscle was being
It moved from waistline to the shoulders.
yeah, basically, from the waist, and like, I think for women, what happens often is like it'll go from the waistline to the butt. You'll get muscular around the butt, which is a good thing. So, rather than around the waist, around the belly. Not a great answer for you, but
It's not easy to quantify.
yeah,
You want
it
to
isn't.
have something that you can actually go, okay, yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
And the tools you get so you've probably seen some of these scales that have like the bioelectrical impedance scales, where you step on it, there's a little metal plate, and it measures your body fat percentage. They're pretty inaccurate. They're not very accurate, and that's unfortunate. Is that process as a whole, like not these tools in particular, but the process of measuring bioelectrical impedance changes it changes with your hydration, right? If you're more or less hydrated, it changes what the result is. So I can go on one of those and then drink a half gallon of water, and it completely changes the result because it's measuring how conductive your body is of electricity, and even just hydration changes that. So it's unfortunate that those are being more popularized. Because they're kind of giving people bad information. So I would say if you've spent money on one of those, I apologize on behalf of the industry. It's not a great tool. The gold standard for like even just measuring body fat, the accessible gold standard is a DEXA scan. That's the one that most people can access. The actual gold standard is an underwater weighing process, which has to be done in the lab, and it's incredibly complicated. And we found out that the formulas they use to use that underwater weighing process are incredibly inaccurate when race changes are taken into account, which you wouldn't have thought was a thing, but it is. So you get negative body fat percentages with some like African American athletes. Compared to the formulas were popularized and used and tested on mostly white male athletes. So bad answer, but
Well,
hopefully.
we have that conversation a
Yeah.
lot, especially if the scale goes up after we increase your weights.
Yeah. If you're measuring right after a workout, something to know is your body retains that water a little bit more. So I just, as a rule, try not to weigh yourself after a workout because in order to maintain hydration, your body does hold on to that. So sometimes it's even just daily, like the time that you do it and what's happening. Yeah. Any other questions before we? I think that
When's the best time to weigh? Sorry.
I don't really have a best time to weigh. What I like to do with people I work with is, you can do this either daily or weekly, depending on your schedule and how you see it affects you. Because some people are very affected by being on a scale, mentally, it just messes with them. Some people aren't. If you're not, I would say you can weigh daily. What I would say is you can weigh daily or twice daily to where you take an average. What I have some of my clients do who are more focused on the weight loss aspect is they're weighing weekly, but they're going to weigh 2 or 3 times that same day, so that they get a good average of, you know, we're kind of trying to eliminate the fluctuations that come throughout the day with that. So if we have a good average the same day every week, taken at the same 2 or 3 times that day, so long as it's consistent, you're probably going to be able to track pretty well what's happening. Now I'd say, you know, one thing I didn't used to do that I'm doing now with folks, especially who are looking at like weight loss and muscle building, is taking like progress photos. So periodically, you know, wearing something athletic where you can kind of see your muscles. You know, taking a photo of themselves in the mirror, or having somebody take a photo of themselves so they can see, they can look back on that 3 months from now, take the photo in the same clothing, and you can see the changes that happen. Day to day, you're personally not going to see those changes unless you have something to reference it, because you see yourself every day if you look in the mirror. So that's just the way I go about it. Yeah, so some guiding principles. Hopefully you noticed a theme. Mobility first. If we can't get mobility, we're probably not going to be able to build strength. And if we try to build strength on top of poor mobility, it's probably going to end up we're stiffer and in more pain. So really we focus on those things. Protein is key. I've harped on that. I'll continue to harp on that. Most people undereat it. I've not ran into anybody who overeats it yet. I'll let you know if I do. Outside of the bodybuilding competitors. And it really does, it supports our joints, it supports our bones, it supports our muscles. Like, if we don't have it, we're not going to be able to make progress like we want to, because we're not giving ourselves that building block that we need. Play the long game. You know, like I talked about with weight loss, even just talking about it when it comes to progressive overload, the longer vision you can have for it, the better. And just recognize that, okay, this is something that has to be a part of my life, so I want to make sure, or for me to be as healthy as I can be, you know, I want to make sure I can do it in a way that's sustainable for me. You know, there's a lot of variance to how often, how frequent, how long those, you know, each person is doing their workouts for. And that depended on their own schedule and what they can actually, you know, there's kind of this line between what is healthy for me and what's going to help me improve my health versus what's going to add too much stress where it's actually going to be, you know, negative, you know, a net negative for my health. And that is, you know, there's a reality there. That's why with my one client I said, hey, let's back it down. You know, we don't need to be training 7 days a week. Let's back it down a little bit, because that kind of stress is not helpful. So, that being said, daily movement is good. Just maybe not daily heavy weightlifting and plyometrics and athleticism at 71, 72 years old. So, what I did for you guys this time, I actually put together a resource for you. You guys are the first group to see this. This is the Mobility Aches and Pains Masterclass. So it's several lessons that I put together talking about all the different components at length. Some of you have heard some of this, but I don't think anybody in this room has heard all of what I have in this, you know, to say in this. So if you have your phone on you, if you'd like, you can scan that. If you want, I can send it to you via email. Happy to do that as well, but scan that, it'll take you to a download page, and you can kind of self-paced work your way through that, because I wanted you guys to have something for coming this time. So. What, I think we got a little bit of time. What questions specifically do you guys have, or comments, or snide remarks?
I was thinking of like the first 2 sessions, and like the first one where and maybe it's part of the lifestyle. You mentioned starting to exercise, nutrition, lifestyle, community.
Mm-hmm.
Because you talked about that before, but it wasn't mentioned
Yeah.
here, so I just wanted, because that to me seems like important.
Yeah. Every person, I'm trying to think, every person mentioned in this group attends a church regularly. So I know at least, the people in there, like that's a piece of their community. I didn't mention it, but I do know, I can tell you every church, every person in here is a regular churchgoer. So they have that aspect of their community. I also, based on what I know, family is important to each of these people, and they're intentional about how much time they spend, with their family. They're very local to their family. So, at least both, for each person mentioned, at least both of those are very frequent and present aspects of their life. And what I'll say is, each one, I would, with the exception of one, of the three, or of the four, three of them, also have a hobby that they pursue, that is both, I think, part of finding joy and stress relief, but also very community oriented. So, taking all those things into account, I think I didn't highlight it, but it is, you're right, it is very important. It's one of those things that, was present for each of these people in each of these examples.
I think the big piece of it is you have to have that support.
Mm-hmm.
Either somebody who's doing it with you, or if you're going to a fitness center and there are like-minded people there who are encouraging you because you're encouraging them. I think that part of the socialization is very important. I may have mentioned it when we talked about lifestyle factors and other supporting factors last time, but a supportive spouse or otherwise an unsupportive spouse or partner is the biggest indicator of whether or not someone's going to be successful in pursuing their health goals. So well done to you two being in attendance. But that is one of the things that drastically changes the odds of somebody being successful. It doesn't mean that, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the spouse is doing it with that person or your partner's doing it with you. It just means that you have their support, and that can look differently. We walk in our community and we have people that we regularly see every morning, and if they don't see us, they actually stop and ask, where have you been?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool.
Yes.
That's great. Any other questions?
I'm taking some chronic pain courses, management courses, and everything was mental.
Yeah.
The whole thing was, it's gotta be in your mind to put your body in a place of happy to be.
There's a lot involved in that. I think you can't have one without the other. I think you can't have the physical without the mental, or vice versa.
Yes.
I think it has to be, and there's research that shows this, like, it has to be both, in order for somebody to truly, get fully out of pain, or even just be in an optimistic place when it comes to their pain, when it comes to living with it. Because you have to, you have to be able to accept where you're at, but then also be optimistic about where you're headed. So, and if you don't have the physical, I think that second piece is hard, right? Be optimistic about what you can do, so, or even just what life looks like.
Yeah, when I left there, it seemed like the physical part was missing out of the whole presentation.
Yeah. And that might be, if I had to guess, this is probably somebody who works in the mental side of things.
That's what, and that's what they were.
Either counseling or, and so, that's their area of expertise. They're going to talk about it.
Yes.
And it's,
tremendously important. So, yeah, but I think, as I assume you agree based on conversations we've had up to this point, you kind of need both.
Yes.
Yeah. So, cool. Any other questions?
Are you seeing the medical community more accepting of this approach? Excuse me.
Broadly, yes. Yeah, broadly, yes. And individually, it's individually, yes, as well. The problem is, I don't want to go on a diatribe about insurance and the healthcare system in the country. And yeah, we could be here for the next 3 hours or days. But the problem is just how the system is set up and the way that people are kind of locked into certain treatment policies. It's no one person's issue. It's a lot of varying complex systems that need ground up and bottom down, top down change. So are people accepting of this approach? Yes. Is it going to be popularized in healthcare anytime soon? Probably not. So that's the best way I could say it. I do have individual, for example, like physical therapists and chiropractors that work well when we're coordinating about a client or a patient. Again, like I said, individually, yes, and broadly, people are, there's an ideal to increase sort of what's going on and increase sort of this kind of focus on, long-term healthcare. But whether or not we see that change sooner or later is a big question mark. So.
Now that the baby boomers are peaking and we're retiring at $4 million a year.
Yeah.
You see your business taking off?
Things have been positive lately.
Good.
But yeah, I think there's always going to be a need for it. Yeah, absolutely. And I think my goal is also to get more people in their 40s and 50s thinking about retirement and thinking about preparing not only their finances but their bodies for retirement as well. So, because you got to be able to, if you want to be able to enjoy retirement, you got to be able to move well enough to do so.
And afford it.
Yes, exactly.
So we can, pass someone to,
I'll
that over there, or whatever.
Yeah,
I don't usually do those things.
I'll help you with it after we're out, if you'd like.
And then, shameless plug, we do have Jackson coming back to us for building bone density, November 12th in this room, 10:30 to 11:30.
So November 12th is the next one. I'm gonna go ahead and shut this off.